Hi, thanks for joining us today, Kevin. Today I'm with Kevin Wong, one of the co-founders for Origami Labs and the creator of ORII Smart Ring, which just smashed its crowdfunding goal on Kickstarter. They aimed to raise 30,000 US dollars and ended up coming away with 333 plus thousand US dollars on their campaign. So thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks, Janice.
So maybe we could just start off by having you share a little bit about your product and your campaign and some of the key considerations that you and your team took before you launched a crowdfunding campaign.
Sure, yeah. We're a local-based Hong Kong startup. The four of our co-founders, we met here in graduate school and university at HKUST. That's basically where we started working on a project called, at the time it wasn't called ORII, it was called Whisper Ring, with the basically design thinking and entrepreneurship center there. Over a period of basically a year and a half to 2 years, we created this basically voice-powered smart ring. This is one of our prototypes right here. Essentially, it's a hardware product that allows you to turn your finger into an extension of your smartphone. So it sends sound through your finger directly into your ear, so only you as a single user can hear. Then there's a dual microphone on the ring that picks up your voice, and then you're able to interact with Siri and Google Assistant basically through a touch of the ear. For us, I think our project was really built on what we call screen-free technology. So we're very much inspired, I think, by my dad. My dad happened to be, I think, visually impaired since he was 13. And so we started out with this design goal of basically trying to get VIs to be able to use their smartphones in a screen-free manner. And over time, I think the product obviously became more of a consumer gadget. But I think we've always sort of stayed tried and true to that base methodology.
Yeah. And so what were some of the things that you thought about why did you decide to launch a crowdfunding campaign, and what were some of the really key elements that helped you make that decision and things you had to tick off before you really got going?
Yes, I think crowdfunding is such an interesting thing because you have many different projects of different sizes that are running a campaign. For us, I think as a hardware project, it's a good idea to run a campaign because running a hardware project is such a capex heavy business. For us, before we launched a crowdfunding campaign, we actually went through 18 iterations of the product, and that process requires a lot of material costs, a lot of R&D costs. And then that's not even including basically, the step of actually jumping into the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people undersell how much it costs to be able to really bring a completely new product into the market. So I think Kickstarter is a great, or Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general is a great platform for you to, one, to see if your product has, validation in terms of customers being willing to, put down money to pre-order your product essentially. Right, to back your product, and then two, it does decrease some of the risks as a maker and as a product creator, right? To be able to, once you get that validation, to use that to then help fund the manufacturing process and the design for manufacturing process for your product.
Great. So having a product well down the path to being pretty much ready to go, you had that in place before launching the campaign, rather than having to kind of work out more of those kinks afterwards, which can be problems for some of the campaigns.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I think it really depends on the complexity of your product, right? So I think if you have if you have a relatively simple tech product, it's possible to have maybe a prototype that's 20% or 30%, and you can conceptualize the rest because it's been sort of a tried or worn road before. It's possible to then run a campaign and then maybe launch 5 to 6 months afterwards. I think oftentimes the difficulty for hardware projects is really underestimating how much technical problems you may be able to run into basically post Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
So if you have a very technical product, I think, like us, I would suggest basically trying to go through as much of that R&D process as possible.
Yeah.
Especially because, if you're trying to build a company and you're trying to have a reputation for not just the product, but for the team, right? Then it's really important that you're able to deliver on what you are promising, basically, in the Kickstarter campaign as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point, really important point, that you're setting up a business and it needs to, you're not only validating the product, but you're validating yourself as a business to be able to follow through, right?
That's right. That's right.
So what do you think were some of the key elements that you had to include in your story on your campaign page? So what were the things, if you were to list them out, say 5 most important things that you needed to tell people on your campaign page, what would those items be?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I would say that creating the campaign page, sometimes there's really not that much content on there, right? Like, there's there's a video, there's sort of an intro, there's some use cases, but I think each one of those points or each one of those bullet points, there's actually a lot of iteration and a lot of thinking behind. So very rarely, I think, will a team really be able to get the page right on the first try. So I think building the Kickstarter page or building the campaign page actually starts months before you actually launch a campaign, right? And it's a process of really, going through not just creating the page, but then showing people, right? Showing customers or drawing traffic in, seeing what kind of reactions you're getting from people. And for us, it was, just to make that more real, our product is a really difficult product to understand because it doesn't exist in the market, right? So people don't know what a voice-powered smart ring is, and so we really struggled with language and how exactly we could explain it and educate people in a really concise way.
Yeah.
So I think a really big part was just learning about how to tell the story for your product and understanding what makes people interested in your product. So I think more than specific bullet points, I would encourage people to try to. So we use a tool. We use a tool called Instapage, right, where we basically built roughly 150 versions of our Kickstarter page.
Wow.
Then through those versions, it's just different titles, different stories, different images, different angles, right? And just to see like how people reacted to the product. Like there was at one point in time, I remember, where we tried to frame ORII as this fashionable smart ring, right? And it didn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so we put it up there. We gave it all the headlines. We had all the mood shots, but I think people liked the images, but they had no clue what the product was doing. Right. And so I think it's through that iterative process and through creating all those pages and seeing how people react that you're able to find the story that works for your product.
Yeah.
Then I think the complex part is that when you're creating these different iterations, it's very much have to be based on hypothesis, right? And the hypothesis has to be the origin of the hypothesis has to be from actual user interaction. So it's not like you're going to throw something at the board and something is going to stick. That's not how it works, right? The way it works is really you go through the development process of working on your product, and through actually speaking with real customers and doing exhibitions, you get hints and ideas about how you should build your page. And then you use that, and then you test it and you build it, and then you continue to refine and refine and refine until your Kickstarter page goes live.
Yeah.
And even then, the page is still editable, right? So what a lot of people don't realize is that oftentimes the crowdfunding page that you see at the end of the campaign has already significantly changed compared to the beginning of the campaign.
When it first
and
launched.
that's true of us too.
Yeah. And you're going to be sharing information along the way and kind of, refining your message. Like you say, that's something that we talk to campaigners a lot about, is learning how people can better understand your product really quickly in only a few words. So Instapage is a great example of a tool that you use to help not only with kind of refining your message, but setting up your page. What are some of the other tools that you found really helped with your pre-launch marketing?
Yeah, I'd say Instapage was one. We obviously, I think, the Facebook advertisements is a very powerful tool. So between Facebook and Google Analytics, we were able to learn a lot. So between sort of both of those analytical tools, we were able to understand mostly during the pre-campaign, it's about the basically CPA, the cost per acquisition, right? And that is usually tied to people leaving their email. Mm-hmm. So we had a specific cost that using those two algorithms, we were able to calculate basically how many advertising dollars do we have to spend to be able to get one customer to join our email list, which is hopefully a indicator to whether or not they were interested in our product. Then once you launch a campaign, then that number becomes even more specific. Yeah. Right? So then it becomes basically, how much ad spend do you need to do to be able to get someone to convert into a backer on your page.
Do you know what number of people signed up for the email list, and then how many of those people actually backed as well?
Yeah, so we had about 19,000 people on our email list.
That's a good number.
And then not all of which were quality. So I would say we had a very quality list, about maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people. And then in total, I think roughly 500 of them converted on the first couple of days.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other tools? Like, did you use a referral campaign, or did you use, did you post it on? You must have posted on Gadget Flow and stuff like that.
Yeah, we did. We used Gadget Flow, Backer Kit, Backer Club.
Okay.
And then a Kick Booster for a referral campaign. I would say, like, other than all those things, like, each one of these tools, they help a little bit, right? They give that little bit of push on the day that you launch them. And we got good returns from, I mean, ultimately it comes down to sort of your project's page's own conversion. But we got good response from most of the tools we use. But I would say probably the most important thing, or our most important strategy, was actually a really, really basic one, which was just one-to-one emails and Skype calls.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So what we did was we basically, every customer that came in, we tried to aim to send them a message and invite them on a call or some kind of further conversation within the first 30 minutes of them backing the project. Oh. So especially because like a campaign like ours is, we had a pretty global campaign. So we'd be basically up between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. responding to messages and then trying to get a conversation going with a lot of these backers. So the way I would put it is, like, a referral campaign is great, but it's not about the tools. It's about the personal touch. Right? You have to think about why people want to refer your campaign, right? The one way is to incentivize people to refer your campaign, but that can only get you so far, right? The most powerful thing is to be able to activate the people that care about your campaign, right? And who cares more about your campaign than the people that have already backed it? Yeah. So what we did basically was we went back and we looked at our backers and decided, okay, which one of these guys can we really activate, to basically ask for their help so that they can then go and spread the word on behalf of us. And we saw that, once we activated 20 of these guys, 30 of these guys, then they became sort of the ambassadors for our project. Yeah. And that helped a lot. Great.
That's such an incredible piece of advice, to actually send an email, follow up with each of your first backers, because then they really feel like they're involved and like they're valuable customers to you. It's a great piece of advice to pass on.
Exactly.
Sorry, finish. Carry on.
Yeah. I was going to say, and then also when you're sending the message, send it as yourself. Yeah. Don't send it as like, the team email or like the Kickstarter email. Send it as a founder. If you think of sort of when a backer receives a message from, one of the creators of the project, it's much more substantial. And I think it's not just the fact that you're trying to activate your customers. You actually learn a lot from your customers as well, right? I think that dialogue and them, you'll get a lot of messages coming back, sort of not just supporting you, but giving you sort of pointers, or you would be surprised in sort of how the backers choose to sort of contribute back to the campaign.
Cool. Would you say that that's sort of one of the main components to your success, or is there one thing that you can pinpoint that was the most important thing?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the probably, other than a good start, I think that would be the main, other than so I would break it into two things. I would say one is the pre-campaign. So really all the work that we put in basically 3 or 4 months before we started the campaign really made sure that we were able to get the momentum going. Yeah. So I think a lot of times Kickstarter campaigns or crowdfunding campaigns in general don't do the necessary groundwork before they launch. So you will know, you should have a very good feeling about how your campaign should do, I think, within the first couple of days.
Yeah.
And that element, and the second element, I think, is really the customer service element, which is not a magic bullet, but it just requires a lot of hard work and time. And I think if you can really execute well on that element, that's something that really sets you apart from other campaigns.
Great. So is that sort of, I guess, another similar question is your advice for other campaigns? It's really focusing on the pre-launch marketing and the customer service element of your process.
Yeah, I think like the customer service element, if I'm going to dig a bit deeper, right? There's actually many more tools than just email alone, right? For example, like one thing that we really like to do was to live stream. This is a very useful tool that that does two things. Like one is it allows you to interact with your customers on a dynamic basis. But two is it builds a lot of validation for your project too. Right? I think there is something to running a live stream where if you run it well, then it builds confidence among your customers as well. So it's something that I think for our project was very important because we were such a technical project. So when we ran live streams and we were able to run basically everything that we're talking about in our Kickstarter campaign live for the customers, it was, I think, a very pivoting moment for the campaign. And then other than that, if you can, meet your backers in person. I remember there were several times where, backers, they were either swinging by Hong Kong or when we're out exhibiting, traveling, we would just let all of our backers and all of our fans know where we were. And you would be surprised how many people showed up. There'd be people basically waiting for us to speak with us, right? And then it was those people that ended up helping us a lot. Like, I think the internet or online campaigns, you're going to get some degree of negativity. Especially if your campaign does well, right? And it came to the point where, a lot of these backers that we met, they would write back their first-hand experiences of using our product on our page, right? So, there might be a negative or comment coming in, like one or two here and there, and they would jump in immediately to basically help defend a project and talk about their basically in-person experiences with meeting the founders. So I think that customer service extends beyond just that first touch, right? It's really about how to build that relationship with them moving forwards.
Okay, great. So we also know that you aimed to raise $30,000, but ended up raising $333,000. There's a lot of advice and info out there in the internet world to help people determine what the target number should be, and it should be low enough to achieve the goal, but obviously you want to make enough money to cover a lot of your costs. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you made that decision?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure, a lot of your audience or people that are building campaigns know that, running a crowdfunding campaign, a big part is it's almost like SEO, right? It's almost like, how can you optimize basically your your page's performance amongst the other crowdfunding campaigns that are running at the same time. A big element is, if we go back to sort of our campaign, almost 55% of our campaign came from organic Kickstarter audience. So basically, traffic that we did not drive into the Kickstarter page, but just the Kickstarter audience in general saw it on the page somewhere, maybe on the front page or maybe on trending areas of the page, and came in to basically take a look and then back the project. So I would say one of the biggest concerns and why people try to make sure that they can hit their target, is that it really helps you get more awareness on the page. Right? So with Kickstarter and with Indiegogo, I think one of the most important elements is how quickly you can reach your first target. Then on the other side, though, it's that target also is very. You will be questioned about that target from your backers as well, right? So I mean, oftentimes backers will look at the target and try to think of, why did you set a 30,000 target, or why did you set a 50,000 target, or why did you set a $10,000 target? So that element is also very important as well. So you need to be able to validate sort of why you set the target the way that you did. So
yeah,
I think
and
it's
if I can
find balance.
Yeah, yeah. And also just being able to tell your backers, I think just taking that one step further, being able to tell your backer where you're putting the money and how it's being used, right? Because that sort of validates the campaign as well, rather than, rather just raising $100,000 for something that shouldn't take that much money to get off the ground.
That's right, exactly. So, I mean, for us, the $30,000 amount was relatively low, right? So basically, but you just have to be honest with your backers. So what we told them was that at $30,000 it would be a loss for us, but we would decide to, at this point, we would cover enough of the tooling costs and enough of the manufacturing costs to at least execute the project for the people that supported us.
Yeah.
And then in there, we had a couple of stretch goals. And so one of the primary stretch goals was at 100K. And so I think that was the number that we were trying to push for within the first week. So we ended up hitting that, I think, on day 4 or on day 5.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about how you communicate that message to the backers. But, at the same time, like for a team like us, we ran the entire Kickstarter campaign ourselves. And we hadn't run a project before. And then like setting a target at 100K, I think less than 0.8% of campaigns make it to that mark.
So that was ambitious.
Yeah, so that would be a super ambitious target to set. So it's complex. I don't think there's any right answer. But I would say more important than anything is that really make sure that you set the target to somewhere that you can reach. That is very, very important. So no matter what, know sort of what your campaign is capable of within the first couple of days, and try to set it there. And if that is not enough for you to run your project, then that means that you shouldn't launch your campaign yet. Then do more pre-campaign work until you build enough momentum for you to have the launch necessary that you need to be able to really push the campaign forward.
Yeah. Awesome. That's such good advice. Amazing. And I guess anything else that you want to share that you think would be of use to people watching who are thinking about their own campaigns coming up?
Yeah, I would say, campaigns is as much about product development as anything. The campaign oftentimes I would say is like, it's like the tip of the iceberg for your startup, right? It's like the 30 days, 45 days of your startup consolidated into one short span. But that doesn't mean that, it's the same way as other things like your business plan or your pitch. You are only as strong as how your product and your solution is, right? So don't forget about basically working on your product, right? That's probably the most important thing. You can have a bad page and run a great campaign, right? Because of how strong your product is. So oftentimes, I don't know how many times I've seen campaign pages that look awesome, right? We're doing great assets, great video, all these things, but the campaign doesn't run well, right? Because a lot of the fundamental elements of the business have not been figured out. So I'd say, you call that, period pre-campaign, right? But the pre-campaign really starts from day one of your business, right? Really figuring out your messaging, building a compelling product, making sure that people want what you're making is basically the most critical element for success for your Kickstarter campaign. And Kickstarter or Indiegogo is only a tool to further validate what you've been working on. Right? It won't turn something that wasn't being validated before, right, into something that will work. So I think that's probably my biggest piece of advice for people that are running a campaign is just to, if you're even thinking about running a campaign, then do the groundwork. Go meet with customers. Go work on your product. Show more real people your product. If real people like your product, then somehow, some way, you can create a great campaign.
Okay. That's such amazing advice. Thank you so much for your time. I know you guys must be super busy fulfilling orders right now. So so I'll let you get back to work. And again, thank you so much, and congratulations on your awesome success.
No worries. Thanks, Janice.
Thanks. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.